Retail earnings in focus this morning. Home Depot just reporting beating estimates for both earnings per share and revenue in the most recent quarter. You can take a look at how the stock is performing in pre-market trading. A nice pop there. We're waiting on results from Macys and Walmart. What are you expecting overall?
Well, continue to see depressed results in retail. Everything really here is a reaction to what's going on with Amazon, capturing so much of this online sales growth last year, capturing so much of the online sales. So everybody's looking at Macys and saying, can they adapt to this? Everybody's looking at Walmart and saying, how are they adapting to this? Walmart has made a huge investment into this space, which has depressed earnings, but also set them up for stronger sales growth in the future. So I think everybody's going to be looking at how are these two firms adapting to online sales. With Home Depot beating expectations, they've been strong in this space. You know, the homeowner spending has continued to be strong. They're looking at stronger same-store sales. They're not expanding their retail footprint. They want to drive more sales at existing stores and push more in their online channel, and they seem able to do that.
But overall retail sales for last month came in better than expected.
Yeah.
Or and then in December they were
revised
higher.
Yeah.
And so it looks like people's optimism is actually translating into more purchases.
Yeah, I think there's two stories here. One is the consumer optimism story, and I think that is a good story, and you're seeing that in these results. But the other story is how are these different retailers responding to that? Can they capture that optimism? What we're seeing is Amazon continues to really dominate that space. Companies like Macys are having a very, very hard time, and analysts are saying, look, should Macys be spitting out its retail? Should this be a real estate play and not a retail play anymore? Very interesting.
The Trump bump is what we can call it in optimism. So, I just really want to get Robert's take on the border adjustment tax, an issue for all of the top retailers in particular. When Congress comes back next week, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan is reportedly having trouble selling this on Capitol Hill. They shoved it into the tax reform idea last year. Retailers hate it.
This is not going to pass because we're in a 70+% consumer-driven economy, and when you start taxing imports more like a VAT or a sales tax, it just gets passed to the consumer. This would not be good for our country. I know they're trying to do it because it actually lowers the deficit, with the Trump plan to raise revenues, but this is not a good plan, and retailers are screaming, and this would just not work.
Well, and Tom Closer yesterday on this program said if you put a border adjustment tax in place, gas prices will go up automatically and the cost of oil will go up automatically. And he said, politically, how do you sell that?
Well, it will impact purchasing power immediately. It just will.
But why would the Republicans come up with something? And there are advocates for this idea.
Yeah.
But again, that's so politically toxic.
Well, two reasons. I think one is if it actually heads off, a worse development would be a straight border tax on a country like Mexico. I think this would be preferable to that, number one. Number two, you need the revenue from the border adjustment tax. This is $1 trillion revenue over 10 years. That allows you to do actual tax reform, not just tax cuts, as you said earlier. Yeah. That doesn't mean it's a good idea, but there's clear reasons why they're looking for that revenue.
Just a comment. I know everyone starts talking about this border tax with Mexico. That can actually get passed. They're part of the WTO. If we did that to Mexico, we'd also have to do it to China. There'd be a huge trade war. That stuff's not happening. That's just rhetoric that's not happening. That would have to actually pass WTO in Congress. I don't see just a border tax with Mexico coming down. This was an alternative. This isn't happening, and so they need to find a different tax reform, which is why I said you'll get tax cuts, you won't get tax reform.
Right, and what I find a little astonishing is that this border adjustment tax idea, sold by House Speaker Paul Ryan and Kevin Brady, they didn't have other Republicans on board with it. You talk to any Republican congressman who has their constituents or major retailers, they're very, very worried about this. And so what were they doing in the last almost a year selling this to other Republican congressmen?
Right.
It's like, did they not think that Donald Trump would get elected to the presidency, and they didn't really think that they'd have to deal with tax reform?
And then for people in Congress, it's all about getting reelected. But I want to talk for a second about Macys, because it's announced that it's going to close 100 stores and cut thousands of jobs. Yeah. But it's also said to be in buyout talks with the parent company of Lord & Taylor and Saks Fifth Avenue.
Right.
So I'm wondering, what does that do for Macys? How is that going to help out in its long-term plan?
Well, I think analysts are looking at Macys and saying the thing's worth about twice as much if you get rid of the retail operations and just look at the real estate portfolio. You're talking about $21 billion potentially compared to a market cap of $9 billion. So they're looking at that and saying this is a better play as a real estate play than a retail play. Send the retail retail assets over to somebody who can create some scale and just work on the property portfolio when it comes to Macy's.
Well, not to get down a different path, but that was the plan of Sears and Kmart, too.
Ouch.
But they're all in the same. But they're all in the same boat. They're trying to survive in a world that they're not really ready to play in. And so, what do you do?
Well, the first internet boom started when 96. They've had 20 years to get it together, and their online delivery engine is not good.
Yeah,
it's not good still after 20 years.